I shared this story in a recent funeral service. Some years ago, my previous senior pastor, Pastor James, asked me to speak for a service. It was an honor, but I was surprised that he asked me. There were other associate pastors who had more experience and gifts. After the service, Pastor James came up to me and said, "Jay, you did well. Good job." I will never forget that moment. I knew I wasn't perfect. Pastor James had been preaching for more than 20 years. He must have seen something that I should change or learn. However, he chose to cheer me up with encouraging words. That was a special moment because it was the last moment I saw him. The encouraging words were his last words to me. He went on a mission trip and came back 2 weeks later. Then he passed away without warning. Has anyone in your life entrusted you with an important task or a mission? How does it feel when your boss or teacher, even parents, praises your work? It gives you joy when you are praised by someone important. Today's text is one of Jesus' parables. A wealthy man left on a journey and entrusted 3 of his servants with talents of money with the expectation that they would store those talents well and provide him a good return on investment. To one, he gave 5 talents. To one, he gave 2 talents. And to one, he gave 1 talent. The master apportioned the amounts to each according to his ability. While the master was gone, the 5 talent and 2 talent servants invested it diligently and wisely. They both doubled the money and that was given to them. However, the 1 talent servant did nothing. He actually buried the money. When the master returned, he rewarded the 5 and 2 talent servants, but he rebuked and punished the 1 talent servant. Now, please keep in mind that Jesus told this parable in the final days before he died on the cross. He knew that he would leave the disciples soon. After resurrection, he appeared to the disciples physically a couple times, but after he ascended to heaven, he wouldn't be with the disciples physically. So what was Jesus trying to say? Jesus was telling this parable with this intention. The disciples were given with a treasure, the gospel message of Jesus Christ. Their job was to share this treasure with others. They were asked to transform the world with the gospel. God had entrusted his words with the Israelites, especially the leaders and teachers. Unfortunately, some of the religious leaders and teachers of the law did not use their responsibility well. They received the Torah, the law, with great care from their ancestors and ultimately from God, but they buried it where ordinary people could not get at it. They wanted a religion without change and without risk. They were too lazy to take care of people. It seemed like Jesus was telling this parable because he didn't want his disciples to live like the 1 talent servant. Someone who was not caring, not loving, not rejoicing, and not living up to his full potential. The 1 talent servant was playing it safe, investing nothing, being cautious, digging a hole, and burying the money in the ground. According to James, the 1 talent servant was someone who had dead faith. James chapter 2 verse 26 says, "For just as the body without the spirit is dead, So faith without works is also dead. Faith without love, faith without passion, and faith without rejoicing is dead faith. It is said that some people misunderstand faith. They think that faith is about personal security, living a good life. The other thing that we should note from this parable is that the one-talent servant misunderstood the master. The servant thought that the master was harsh. This is what the one-talent servant said in verse 24. Master, I knew that you are a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Was this true? No, it wasn't true. In Jesus' day, a talent was a unit of money equal to about 15 years of earnings by a day laborer. Considering the amount of money, each of the gifts was enormous. Even the one-talent servant received an enormous amount of money. Shouldn't he have given thanks to the master and responded to the blessing with gratitude? It really saddens me when I see people who have misunderstanding about God. Some people say that God is not fair or God is an angry tyrant. If we read the Gospels closely, we should find God's everlasting mercy and love. God gave up his one and only Son to save us from sin. Jesus gave everything that he had to bring God's people back. He gave his flesh, his blood, and his life. We cannot calculate the blessings and treasure that we receive from God. The master from this parable took risks to entrust extraordinary wealth, power, and freedom to the servants. The master's intention was not to make more profit. He had more than enough. Rather, he was willing to give more so that the servants might live creatively and fully. The master was not harsh. He was generous and merciful. However, the one-talent servant was paralyzed by fear. He couldn't live his life fully. That is a sad part of this parable. He misunderstood his master. I have been participating in the Zoom Bible study at our church. We have been studying the book Unafraid, written by Adam Hamilton. Hamilton said in the book that he had met people who live in fear. Often, people fear things that will never happen. The book is about helping people to unlearn fear and to help them to trust God, to help them to live their lives fully. Hamilton talked about different types of fear in the book. There is fear of crime, race, terrorism, fear of failure, disappointing others, insignificance, loneliness. There's fear of change, missing out. There's fear of aging, illness, and dying. I was really surprised that we have many different types of fear. What about us? Don't we sometimes live in fear and become paralyzed by it? Here, this parable is inviting us to live a life unafraid. It is inviting each one of us to have faith in the living God, to live our lives as fully as possible. This parable is telling us our Master is merciful. He is good. We don't need to be afraid of failure, or we don't need to be afraid of the Master. I don't think that the Master would have punished the other two faithful servants if they had lost everything. That's not the master we're serving. The master's concern is whether we are living the life that the master intends. The master wants us to live with joy and confidence. The master asks the servants to join his banquet, the feast. In verse 23, enter into the joy of your master. The master finally came back from his journey and called the servants to give an account of their activity. The 5 and 2 talent servants gave a report with confidence. They produced works of love and mercy. Now let's read verse 20. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. The 2 talent servant also replied with exactly the same words to the master. The 5 and 2 talent servants understood that the master was good and merciful. My master entrusted his wealth with me. That is a blessing. Whatever happens, he will encourage me, he will embrace me, and he will forgive me. These 2 servants took risks because they trusted their master. They weren't afraid of failure because they knew that their master wanted them to live their lives fully. Their master gave up his son, one and only son, to give them life. There were many faithful servants of God who lived like the faithful servants in this parable. Apostle Paul was one of them. Apostle Paul lived like the 5 and 2 talent servants. He understood that the blessings and treasure he received from God were precious. Apostle Paul traveled thousands of miles to reach out to more people. He planted numerous churches, and he took care of them with love and passion as if they are their own. They are his own children. Nothing could stop him. Danger from rivers, bandits, Jews, Gentiles, danger in the city, wilderness, at sea, from stoning to beating to shipwreck, nothing could stop him. He produced many fruits. Churches in Asia and Europe, his disciples like Silas and Timothy, and many more.